Harding Street in Medfield. I'm here to speak on Factor 7, the relative merit of the hospital's determination of need application. My personal connection with Boston Children's Hospital is primarily as a father of a son who was treated at Children's for several years. I'm a deeply grateful supporter of the dedicated children's staff who took care of my son and introduced him to the Prouty Garden during a time when the garden provided him and us with healing that transcended and often compensated for the medical treatments our son was receiving. I can attest to the critical impact the Prouty Garden had on my son's quality of life during a time when he faced grave uncertainties about the likelihood of surviving his illness. I'm here today to provide comments on Factor 7 in your regulatory review, the relative merit of Boston Children's Hospital's proposed project. The overall point I make is that Children's has not demonstrated that it has adequately considered alternatives in its current plans. In fact, the hospital does not identify all alternatives considered or provide details about its evaluation of such alternatives as required. It does not present sufficient information to enable the DPH to test the hospital's conclusion that the proposed project is the superior alternative. The hospital's 2008 Institutional Master Plan, the IMP, approved by the Boston Redevelopment Authority, included plans for an addition of 2 floors above the main building, along with development of a patient care center on the site of the Enders building. The 2008 plan called for shifting research functions from the Enders building to the Longwood Research Institute, which was part of the planned construction in the IMP. About 10 years ago, Children's purchased property at 340 Longwood Avenue. A key selling point for the property was that it had already been approved for construction of an 18-story office tower. Children's is now trying to sell 340 Longwood Avenue. The hospital obviously has an option of constructing a building on this site, but failed to identify this as an alternative in its DON application. Charles Weinstein, Children's current Director of Real Estate Development, is quoted in a recent Boston Globe article saying, "Children's has devoted its strategic growth to clinical, not research." If that's the case, then they should move research out of the existing building in order to free up more clinical space. There are yet more possibilities. Children's Hospital acknowledges in its DON application that it also owns the site at 333 Longwood Avenue, but fails to explain why this property couldn't help Children's address its needs. The hospital also could purchase other land north of Longwood Avenue. In conclusion, Children's DON application fails to comply with Factor 7 because the hospital fails to disclose that its present expansion plan is a departure from its previous plan, fails to explain why this change was necessary, and fails to adequately identify and discuss possible alternatives to its current plan, relying instead on a bald assertion that there are no viable alternatives, which is wrong on the facts. In an article published in the Pulse of Longwood section of Stat News this past December, Charles Weinstein is quoted as saying, "Longwood is not overdeveloped, it is under-demolished. Get rid of all these old, small buildings that really have no place in Longwood anymore." Boston Children's Hospital should take its own advice and more fully explore alternatives to its current plans.